Coming up on this week's episode of Shadow Talk, we will be discussing a now patched but exploited Fortinet FortiWeb flaw used to create admin accounts, how the Akira ransomware group has been experimenting with new tools, bugs, and attack surfaces, a new phishing tool using smart redirects to bypass detection, and finally, our next installment of Threat Hunter hacks. We'll be joined by Threat Hunter Tristan to discuss the latest trends he's been seeing across our customer instance and what you can do about them. I'm Kim, a Cyber Threat Intelligence Analyst here at ReliaQuest, as well as the host of Shadow Talk. And joining me again this week is John, another one of our Cyber Threat Intelligence Analysts with a strong technical background after years of working in incident response. So he's bringing a robust technical perspective. Hey, John, how's it going?
Very good. Glad to be on another episode.
Glad to have you back. Missed you last week. Before we get into the news, I have a huge announcement. You can now listen to Shadow Talk via YouTube. So head over to the link in our link tree if that is your preferred medium for getting your podcasts, and subscribe to Shadow Talk on the ReliaQuest YouTube page. So John, throwing it over to you then, what do you want to chat about in the news this week?
Yeah, so starting off, we have the critical authentication bypass vulnerability in FortiWeb Web Application Firewall, or WAF or WAF. And an attacker can leverage the path traversal vulnerability by sending a specifically crafted HTTP request, and ultimately allows attackers to perform privileged actions, including creating persistent admin accounts with hard-coded credentials. There's been widespread exploitation of this since October 2025, targeting the unpatched FortiWeb appliances. And threat actors can achieve full administrator access, manipulate settings, disable security controls, and establish backdoors for ongoing access. So there's significant potential for impact here. And notably, threat actors have been actively selling proof of concepts, or POCs, and zero-day exploits related to Fortinet in recent days on dark web forums, as we've observed. And this highlights the significant attention that threat actors are placing on Fortinet and its vulnerabilities in general, really stressing that need to patch. The vulnerability is tracked as CVE 2025-64446 and has a full CVSS score of 9.1, or a critical severity vulnerability. And it's been patched in versions 8.0.2 and later.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there is that patch available to mitigate this vulnerability. So we recommend upgrading your FortiWeb appliances to that version. So that's 8.0.2 or higher. But if patching isn't possible for you right now, as a temporary workaround, you can disable HTTP or HTTPS for internet-facing interfaces until those updates can be applied. Limiting access to HTTP and HTTPS management interfaces to internal networks is a best practice that reduces but doesn't eliminate entirely the risk. And because attackers are abusing this flaw to create persistent admin accounts with hard-coded credentials like TestPoint and Trader1, you should be checking for and disabling any accounts with those naming conventions. And we'd also recommend rotating credentials for all administrator accounts created since October 2025, when the exploitation began. And finally, you can check for HTTP post requests to the vulnerable endpoint in this instance, which might indicate any attempts that attackers were trying to exploit this vulnerability on vulnerable instances. But the key takeaways here for any organizations using FortiGate, FortiWeb, that any unpatched devices, any out-of-date devices are a critical risk to your business. So immediate patching, as we said, and that proactive monitoring are really essential to preventing any unauthorized access and mitigating any potential data breaches associated with the access gained via this route. And we'd also recommend organizations adopting a layered defense strategy, regularly updating your security appliances, and conducting vulnerability assessments to minimize exposure to exploitation. And now, to those at home, considering the widespread exploitation of the Fortinet FortiWeb authentication bypass vulnerability, we're curious to know how you think threat actors will evolve their tactics to target unpatched systems or to bypass patch protections even. Are there any unique strategies that your organization has implemented to proactively detect and mitigate these risks? Share your thoughts and insights with us. You can do that in the comments on our YouTube channel or by emailing us at reliaquest@shadowtalk.com. Now, moving on, you may have seen in the news last week that Akira ransomware has been labeled by many government agencies as posing an imminent threat to critical infrastructure. So if we have a quick recap on Akira, Akira is a ransomware as a service operation, meaning it has affiliates, probably hundreds of affiliates, that are dropping its ransomware, targeting both small and medium-sized businesses, as well as organizations in critical sectors like healthcare and manufacturing. The advisory that was issued on Thursday last week by several US agencies outlines how quickly Akira has been exfiltrating victim data, which really reinforces the need for speed in security operations that we've spoken about a lot on Shadow Talk. And Akira has also hit the headlines this week for a shift in its targeting of virtual infrastructure. The group has previously attacked VMware ESXi and Microsoft Hyper-V hypervisors. But now it's being reported that the group has encrypted virtual machine disk files associated with Nutanix's Acropolis hypervisor. We're going to call it AHV for ease going forwards. So AHV is a lesser known but nonetheless critical platform, and it claims to serve, I think, around 27,000 customers, and that includes the likes of the US Navy, NASDAQ, and London Gatwick Airport. So some really key customers in really critical sectors as well. And what is also attractive about AHV, is that it's also a place where defenders might not think to look. They're going to focus instead on those hypervisors that I mentioned earlier, EXSI, Hyper-V, that criminals are more commonly known to target. And a few more points on what is making Akira a significant threat to businesses right now. As I mentioned, the speed in which they can exfiltrate data. Victim data is being lost in just over 2 hours when the Akira ransomware group are involved. The group is actively exploiting known vulnerabilities in widely used technologies like Veeam and SonicWall. And as this move to Nutanix shows, the group is continuing to innovate and expand its tools and its TTPs.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And for those that don't know, Akira in Q2 and Q3 of this year has been the second ranked ransomware group based off of the number of organizations they are naming on their data leak site. Really just goes to show their success, and likely the continuation and development of these new tactics is driving that success, similar to what we've seen the number one group, Quillen, doing as well. To give you some context around Akira 2, they've estimated that the group has received over $245 million in ransomware payments by September of 2025 this year, which is really significant. Again, highlights the success of the group and also highlights the potential infrastructure and backing this group has to sign on new affiliates, spin up new infrastructure, as well as potentially discover new 0 days. So just want to highlight how effective this group can be. Again, they have more than 1,000 known victims globally, with the real number likely being higher, as that's just what's been released publicly. Some key defenses against this are going to be patch known vulnerabilities quickly, specifically those edge devices like sonic firewalls. Make sure we're addressing those vulnerabilities. As Kim mentioned, the speed here is really critical with data exfiltration taking place in under 2 hours. And harden virtual environments, secure those hypervisors, including lesser targeted platforms like Nutanix AHV, and monitor for unusual activity, such as those hypervisor environments being accessed at irregular hours, irregular command execution, or etc. Finally, we want to restrict the remote monitoring and management tools. This is very common for any ransomware group, but a great defense. We want to make sure that we are limiting the use of things like AnyDesk and LogMeIn. Essentially, at the end of the day, any remote management tool that is not authorized in your environment should be completely disabled through application controls where possible. And for our listeners at home, with Akira attacks evolving in their consistent place as one of the top ransomware groups, what do we think is the next step for them? Will they climb to the number one spot and challenge Quillen? Or will law enforcement quickly work to take them down based off of the success? Let us know in the comments on our YouTube channel or through our email if you'd like to join in. Next up in the news, we have a phishing tool using smart redirects to bypass detection. This is known as the Quantum Route Redirect, and it targets Microsoft 365 users across 90 countries, with 76% of the victims being located in the United States. And what makes this particularly notable is those smart redirects, which essentially differentiates between a security tool and a human user connecting to the phishing link. And it redirects security tools to a legitimate site while sending people to the actual phishing pages, increasing the chance that those phishing emails will make it past the email security tools, and ultimately that a user will click on that link, enter their credentials, and lead to the further campaign of initial access from that point. Another key point around here is that it simplifies phishing campaigns for low-skilled attackers by automating the complex processes and enables widespread credential harvesting. This is really important because oftentimes we see phishing being one of the least barrier to entry for low-skilled threat actors to get a foothold and begin building up their credibility and their skill sets. So notably, this lowers that barrier to entry even more.
Yeah, definitely. If we dig into those two key factors a bit more, that's making this quantum route redirect such a new and powerful tool for attackers. Like you said, it's the simplicity and the lowering of the barrier to entry. So it's offering attackers a pre-configured setup. It's turning a hard to develop attack into a one-click attack for these people. So those low-skilled attackers are going to be able to use it to launch a sophisticated phishing campaign. And like you said, John, more organizations are then successfully targeted and successfully phished. And the attackers can use the tool to create very diverse campaigns. So they can impersonate DocuSign, conduct payroll fraud, suggest that somebody has missed a voicemail message, and then also QR code phishing. Now, the URLs used in this campaign are consistently following the same patterns, and they're hosted on parked or compromised domains. And so they are using those compromised domains to support the brand impersonation aspect of phishing, really to trick victims. And then that leads into that second aspect that you spoke about, that redirect system that tailors where it takes the user based on who the user is, allowing it to quickly bypass the protections built into email systems.
So this is a really advanced phishing tool, and I'm curious to see how it develops. But for organizations right now, you can defend yourself by enhancing your email security, specifically deploying advanced cloud email security products with natural language processing, also known as NLP, for email content analysis and impersonation detection. Also look for tools with improved URL filtering to ensure those security systems and web application firewalls have robust filtering to mitigate the intelligent redirects in this campaign. Ultimately, defenders can utilize sandboxing as well to implement analysis of these links within these emails and prevent malicious payloads from getting to those users or to remediate after the fact. A key thing, too, for defenders when using sandboxing technology, many of them offer the option to analyze the URL directly from a residential proxy, which can oftentimes bypass those redirects that threat actors commonly use.
Shadow Talk is brought to you by ReliaQuest, the global leader in AI cybersecurity. ReliaQuest helps enterprise cybersecurity teams contain threats in minutes with its agentic AI security operations platform, Gray Matter. ReliaQuest makes security possible for the most trusted enterprise brands in the world. Learn more at ReliaQuest.com.
In the second half of today's episode, we are going to have the second segment of our Threat Hunter Hacks portion, where our threat hunters dive into the insights and the trends that they are seeing in our customer environments and provide defense recommendations based off of those. So today we are joined by the threat hunter Tristan, who works here at ReliaQuest, specializing in mitigating active breaches and protecting customer networks. He also researches emerging threats and attack techniques to enhance proactive threat hunting and organizational security. Welcome, Tristan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing very good. Glad to have you here.
Fantastic.
So let's jump right into what you're seeing. I have a question for you. Phishing is often considered one of the most common attack vectors. Does this still hold true? And how do the other initial access methods come into play?
So phishing still is definitely one of the top compromise methods that we see out there, but we've kind of seen a shift in how phishing is used a little bit. So, for example, recently we've seen phishing be more targeted towards the BEC, business email compromise. So compromising a user's email account and potentially sending out additional emails, malicious emails to the rest of the organization to harvest more credentials or gain more information. But we haven't really seen it as much in the ransomware initial access type of attacks. So we've been seeing more so exploitations towards remote services with these sort of ransomware cases and different espionage cases. So more so exploiting your external VPNs or external brute forcing campaigns on unknown assets and social engineering, as well as SEO poisoning, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later. But the sort of use case for phishing has seemed to sort of settle more into these data exfiltration and financial fraud sort of realm.
That's really interesting insight. And, oftentimes we think of phishing as being that number one threat, but seems like the impact stemming from phishing has changed as of late. So awesome. And we've spoken a lot about on Shadow Talk recently about attackers using search engine optimization techniques in their campaigns, particularly with payroll fraud, malware drops, and fake PDF software. Can you walk us through how these attacks work and why they become so effective?
Exactly. So if you're a threat actor and you want to reach a wide audience of people, and you might have some sort of target in mind. So maybe you want to target people who are looking up the company's payroll information, or maybe you want to target some people who might be looking to download like PDF software or some utilities that they might want to use or need to just go about their day and their jobs. And they set these ads up where they pay Google some money to get their site sponsored. So when you search certain keywords, it'll pop up as a sponsored result. And you may, be familiar with these as if you're looking up normal things that you need. A lot of times a sponsored result might be an actual good result. And it might be something that you actually click on and use because it's something you're looking for. And that's a pretty normal thing for users to do. But adversaries are taking advantage of that, and they're setting up fake sites which look real, but actually have a malicious goal in mind. And we've seen it redirect users to credential harvesters to harvest credentials, then log in to gain payroll information. And we've also seen quite a bit of malvertising. So that's kind of what it's called. So advertising on SEO, getting the user to click on a link and download what they think might be real software, but it actually is malicious. And we've seen a couple different varieties of the malvertising. We've seen software that just doesn't work. It kind of errors out, but then carries out its malicious activity. So it might make the user think, oh, well, this just doesn't work on my computer. I'll go find another one to download. And then they do so. But we've also seen Trojanized version of legitimate software that actually does perform its function. However, also has a malicious side to it as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm reminded of one of our top threats that we've seen grow this year of the Oyster malware campaigns and how they are very often targeting IT software, or I should say impersonating IT software, such as PuTTY, network administration tools, and things like that, likely through SEO poisoning. I'm also reminded of a lot of the cases I've seen where the SEO that leads the user to the malware is really niche in a specific job role to help drive those Google results. Kind of like you mentioned for the financial employees or legal employees, they use really niche use cases to get the malware to them in a targeted fashion.
Exactly. And so this can even give them an advantage sometimes because maybe they'll be targeting administrative software. And so an admin might go and download a piece of software from a sponsored site and might not realize that it's actually Trojanized or malicious software. And then they execute it and end up, starting out with higher privileges as they would if it was just a regular end user. And that's pretty effective.
Yeah, it's a good call out. And one of the things that kind of surprised me, especially around the Oyster campaigns, is how many IT administrators were actually downloading that software. A lot of times you would think of your more technical users as being able to identify that. But at least from what we saw across our customer base, we saw a large amount having that file downloaded still. So it was very surprising.
Yep. Definitely a very effective campaign and attack type.
Well, moving on, and speaking of social engineering, we've seen a lot around social engineering, specifically via phone calls in the news this year. What are some recent trends or examples, such as those involving Scattered Spider, and how effective have these tactics been?
Right. So we've seen Scattered Spider target help desk throughout the year. That's been pretty widely reported. And, we've observed the exact same activity. Sometimes they'll target external help desks. So maybe a company will pay for help desk services from another company, and Scattered Spider will take advantage of that by calling those help desk users and asking for credential resets. They're also pretty persistent. So they'll sometimes call back more than once and try to get back in, get the user credentials, and then log in and continue their attack. And additionally, we've also seen it continuing, and we'll get into it a little bit, but the Teams calls, the phone calls with users. But we do see the sort of type of phone call, actual like voice, like it's a human calling these users to get in. And that's a little bit more effective than maybe just an email, because users might not be trained to fully look out for, suspicious phone calls. We've also seen it kind of tie into financial fraud too, where they'll call help desk, get an account, and then change payroll information and actually route, people's paychecks to a bank account that it's not supposed to be routed to. And that's kind of an attack vector. So the voice, in person, almost personable sort of social engineering tactics have been very effective.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And one of the points you called out about it leading to financial fraud makes me curious, because in a lot of the public incidents we've seen from Scattered Spider, one of the accounts they're compromising is the CFO account, or that chief financial officer. And I certainly wonder how much fraud they can conduct from the range of that account if they have extended access. Moving on, though, this is a return of a name that was once commonplace, Blockbuster. They used to be a significant ransomware group earlier this year, but disbanded in February 2025 after internal disagreements led to their chat communications being released, which gave a wealth of information such as their tactics, aliases, and etc. Ultimately, the group fell out after that. But a curious question, are their main tactics still prevalent, specifically those around the email spam and the main Teams phishing over voice and communications? What trends have we observed with those tactics, and what role has phishing awareness played in the defense against them?
So these attacks are still very relevant, and they are still happening on a daily basis. We do still see the email spam, then followed by the Teams call. And the way that attack is architected is to cause distress for the end users who they're calling. So they'll fill their inbox up with spam, make them think that something's wrong with their account and that they can't, access their email. And then help desk will come calling them and say, hey, I've got a solution. Just download this remote access software and we'll get it fixed. And then your email will be fine. And, the spam does stop because they stop sending spam emails to these end users. We've seen that continue. However, we have seen the effectiveness of the attacks drop. And we've noticed that they've started calling more users when they do these attacks. So they might actually end up calling 5, 10, or even 15 users in one go, trying to get into an organization. And this is caused by usually external team settings. So allowing your internal users to communicate to external tenants, and this can result in them being able to actually get up on a phone call with these users. And they always pose as IT help desk or some sort of support to actually get on their host and interact, because this is a usual process for help desk, is to remote onto hosts and fix whatever issues users are having. So it seems normal to these users. But recently, with training kind of developed, I know that some companies actually go through external Teams calls training to make sure that their users are aware of this attack vector. Certain red flags to look out for during calls are like urgency, potentially asking for credentials when they might not be, or not following a company's general help desk policies. And that's why it's important to ensure that your organization actually has procedures that help desk always goes through, so that these users know the process that usually takes place, and they're able to spot abnormal, potential calls or a bad actor trying to social engineer. And we've also seen the Microsoft, they've caught up and they've started implementing different defense measures against this. So now if you get an external Teams call, you might actually get a warning saying, hey, this is a suspicious call. We don't think that this is legitimate. And it'll actually let the user have to click through a couple extra steps to get on the call.
That's really interesting. There's a couple key points that I want to highlight there, especially around how you say the continuation of those Black Basta tactics. I remember tracking the fall of Black Basta. We actually have a report called The Decline of Them on our website. And specifically, I remember looking for in February 2025, after the group disbanded, if there were any new tactics associated. And even well into April and after, there were new persistence methods, new lateral movement methods still emerging around those tactics, even though the group name was no more. And it really just reinforces that point as to why we don't want a tunnel vision on these group names, because they change so much. But at the end of the day, the threat actors still need to pay the bills, and they will just move to another group as it suits them. So that's the main point. And then the second one I want to reiterate is around the effectiveness of the phishing training. So both when it comes to scattered spider type impersonation as well as Black Basta type impersonation, we've seen it be very effective to have targeted user training around how to handle those threats, ultimately coming back to the SOPs or standard operating procedures we have set up around those verification methods, so that users can verify they're talking to the help desk, and help desk can verify that they're talking to users. And in the experience that I've seen, some of those public calls that you hear around threat actors trying to get in, the strong and well-defended help desks almost always stop that call as it goes through, even to the point where the threat actor starts getting frustrated and just begins to hang up. So they're just very effective. Really want to drive that point home, that targeted phishing training is the best defense in these initial access methods.
Make sure that your help desk is trained and aware of what suspicious calls can sound like, and make sure that your end users do the same as well. That's very effective.
Definitely. Well, I just want to say thank you to Kim and Tristan for joining us and providing your insights today. I want to say thank you for our listeners for taking the time to listen, as well as any engagement in the questions and below. A reminder, we now released Shadow Talk on YouTube, which can be found in the link tree. And additionally, tomorrow, Thursday, November 20th, join ReliaQuest experts as we explore our 2025 lessons and predictions for 2026 as to how the cyber threat landscape will evolve. Again, that's tomorrow, November 20th at 10 a.m. GMT, and another session at 1 p.m. EST. There's a link to register in the link tree below.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Shadow Talk. If you'd like to get in touch, we're just an email away. You can send your questions for us to shadowtalk@reliaquest.com. Please don't forget to subscribe so you can get next week's episode delivered direct to your podcasting platform of choice. And we really appreciate it if you can rate and review Shadow Talk wherever you listen to us. It'll make a huge difference and help us reach new listeners. We'll be back next week with another episode of Shadow Talk, your weekly cybersecurity news and threat research podcast made for practitioners by practitioners.